Welcome to Waking the Why, a podcast about uncovering the purpose behind life's crucible moments. Each episode, you'll hear from real people who turn their struggles into strength and their stories into light. If you're searching for meaning, walking through something hard, or just love stories that stir the soul, you're in the right place.
Hello, friends, and welcome to Waking the Why, where we discover the purpose behind life's crucible moments. My name is Stacy, and today our guest is Weston Brandon. Now, Weston and I met each other a couple months ago at the Achievers Retreat, and lucky for me, Weston was so willing to volunteer to be on the podcast. And so Weston actually gave a presentation at the retreat, and it was phenomenal. So you guys, you are in for a treat today. Okay, Weston, to start, tell everybody your story.
If you watch any of the reels, any of my podcast interviews, it's usually about the story of losing my wife. That was 6 years ago when I was 23. She was diagnosed with an incompetent cervix and had my son at 26 weeks. And he's fine. He's 6 now. He's in the bedroom, not asleep right now. And he has 2 more siblings now, so I've remarried and had a couple more kids. But that time, very early in life, was a rough one.
Okay, so she's pregnant. Did you call it an incompetent cervix?
Yeah.
Did you know that?
No, basically what it means is that she dilated without going into labor, right? Yeah. So she was at work, she's a pharmacy technician, and then felt like something was coming out, and she's like, this isn't good, and called her OB. They said, hey, head up to the emergency room just to get checked out, just in case, and got the diagnosis of said incompetent cervix. So I got a phone call, and so I drove up to the hospital to meet her, and everything else was good. They're just like, the door opened, so you can't stand up anymore. So they're like, you are stuck on bed rest until the baby comes. Like, that could be a week, it could be 3 more months. And so that wasn't super comfortable for her to deal with.
How long was she in the hospital then? Went from the time that she got admitted to when she actually had the baby?
It was about a week.
A full week.
Yeah, she got a full week, and then he was born on March 21st of 2019. And she held him in for a week. And so I got a phone call in the morning from her, said, hey, he's coming out breech, so they're gonna do an emergency C-section. And they said, they're not waiting for you, so you need to bust your butt and get up here. So yeah, they pulled him out, and he weighed 1 pound, 13 ounces.
That's crazy. Were you told that incompetent cervix would have anything to do with potentially impacting her life?
No. In fact, I was told that incompetent cervix wasn't as uncommon as you might think. That, like, we see it. It's not anything really to be worried about. Just with how early your son is, we're more worried about him than we are her.
Right.
Right. So she was discharged, I think, the next morning, and was fine. They had to go run a couple of tests because they were worried about some developmental things. How's his brain? How's his blood? How's all these things? And everything came back good. He was perfectly fine, other than just being too small.
So you spent how many days going back and forth? I mean, how long was your son in the NICU for?
2.5 months.
What time did your wife pass away?
That was April 11th was the day.
So a couple weeks after the baby was born.
It was about 2 weeks. That was a pulmonary embolism, which is a blood clot. And that just, all the risk factors, being pregnant makes you at risk of it. Mm-hmm. Surgery makes you at risk of it. Mm-hmm. Bed rest makes you at risk of it. So it's just like, everything kind of stacked. And they did put leg massagers on her calves. Mm-hmm. And they said that's what it's for, is to help prevent blood clots from forming. But she ended up being one of the statistics that got one.
Was she home?
Yeah. I was still working from home. I was with her when it happened. So the symptoms of the pulmonary embolism is shortness of breath. She just thought she was having an anxiety episode, and looking back after it happened, we saw little symptoms of that happening and getting a little bit more frequent. It wasn't in this house. This was in Texas. This house here, we're in Utah. But she was sitting on her couch, similar setup to this, and I was in office just doing my job. I was working in sales and calling people and emailing, and then she told me to, hey, help me calm down. I'm having a anxiety attack or something like that. And I just went to hold her to try to help her calm down and catch her breath, and she never did. She ended up collapsing in my arms, and I had to do CPR on her for a few minutes until EMTs arrived. So I called 911, and it was while I was on the phone with 911 that she collapsed on me, and they had to walk me through doing CPR. And they grabbed her and they took her to the hospital, and we followed them up there. And her parents were in town with us, so I'd called them right before I called 911 actually, and so they were already on their way. And so all of us rode to the hospital together, and we met up there. And it had been probably 25 minutes since she had collapsed, and they said they were still doing CPR. So I was like, that ain't good. And that was kind of the moment that I was like, I don't think this is going to pan out. Yeah. And, well, it didn't.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. You're a first-time father. Your son is in the NICU. You've just had this horrific experience with your wife. She's no longer there. Like, what do you do?
But I don't know. There's not an answer to that question, I don't think, other than don't hurt yourself in the process, right? I had a moment alone, because since the EMT showed up, I hadn't been alone until a very brief window, because the social worker comes back and eventually tells us they did get a pulse back. It was shallow, but it did work. And so they were getting all the equipment and everybody out of her room. So they take my mother and father-in-law and they go in to be with her. So then I'm by myself there. And that was where I had to have I wouldn't call it a come to Jesus moment, because it's not like I wasn't shallow in my faith. I had served a mission what I thought was grounded in my faith. But everything that I had spent my life believing and studying and teaching, especially everything about the afterlife, all of a sudden was real. Because before I had kind of thought it was real, but it was, turned out it was a little bit more abstract until that happened, you know? And so I had to have a moment where I was like, if I have ever needed God to talk to me, and if I ever need him again, this is the moment. So I just knelt down and prayed. I'm like, do not leave me hanging. I'd had experiences of God talking to me through music and also through scriptures. So music felt weird at the moment. So I just grabbed my phone, had an app on my phone with all the scriptures and magazines and everything on it. So I just closed my eyes and started tapping. And I opened up to a scripture in the Book of Mormon, Alma chapter 40. And the very first verse of that chapter reads, "And now, my son, I have somewhat more to say unto thee, for I perceive that thy mind is worried concerning the resurrection of the dead."
Wow.
Yeah. And I just tapped and tell me that's coincidence. Tell me, I don't believe that's coincidence. So everything I was reading after that was, my mind would immediately come up with another question. And then the next verse I would read would answer that question. And it was just this, straight download. So that didn't fix my feelings.
Right.
It didn't fix the situation. And it was also kind of without saying it, that she's not going to make it, but kind of saying it, because it didn't turn to a scripture about Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead. Right. It was talking about that. Right. So that was kind of my answer there too. And that experience became the main anchor for everything moving forward. I was mad at God for a long time. Yeah. I was very upset with him. I bet. But I had to keep falling back on that. And that was what kind of sustained me for the next while.
Yeah. So you just lost your wife and you have a little guy that's doing well, but still in the NICU. Yeah. Like, what did it look like then? How did you do it? How did you even... I remember taking my first child home and Cody, my husband, and I looking at each other going,
now what?
Why did they leave us? Like, why did they let us go from the hospital? We have zero idea what we're doing. Yeah. Right? And so here, like, you're with your wife, this is what you're doing together, and now it's you.
Yeah, I wasn't alone, because my in-laws were still there, and God bless them for that. And but they weren't there 24/7. Right. They were around. They would come over most every day. There were a few days where they had to go do something, but for the most part, I had check-ins and help with some things. But yeah, like nighttime, that was it. It was me. And the NICU had him they get him on a schedule. Every 3 hours he's eating, every 3 hours he wakes up like clockwork. So that was exhausting for me to deal with. And honestly, for the first little while, I don't know how I did it. I don't really have a choice. Yeah. It was just numb going through the motions, for at least talking about when I brought him home. For sure. But for the 2 months, there was 2 months where he wasn't home and I was basically living in the NICU back and forth, with him. And I would be home and my in-laws would be over and I'd do anything and everything to distract myself from the horror that my mind is, So me and my brother-in-law played lots of video games together. We'd go ride motorcycles, trying to find some semblance of things to enjoy, because all of us are seriously going through it, Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it was just like, you're just walking forward. You don't really know where you're going. Mm-hmm. I'm just having to, like I said, not hurt myself in the process and trust that eventually he's going to get out of the NICU and then I'll figure it out. And I could no longer think that far down the road. It was more survival mode where I'm like, I just got to get through today and tomorrow. I got to make it to the next thing on my calendar, is more what it was. Immediately after she passed away though, and I've discovered talking to, now there's not a whole lot of guys that have been through what I've been through, but they're out there, and I've talked to a handful of them, and we all share a very similar experience. And it's not just for widowers too. Sometimes it might be a divorce that might bring up feelings like this, or some type of loss, right? I wasn't having these thoughts with these words at the time, but it was probably the first week, maybe 2 weeks, before I recognized it was happening and intentionally tried to fix it. But my mind had some feelings of resentment toward my son that I wasn't recognizing.
Yeah.
And I realized I don't take credit for much, but I will at least take credit for the fact that I recognized that on my own and I fixed it on my own. Because the way that I recognized it was the nurses in the NICU were encouraging me to do skin to skin with my son and hold him, Yeah. And for some reason I didn't want to. I was like, I don't want to do that. And the nurses are like, it's really good for you. Like, you need to do that for him, for his development, and also your bonding and stuff. And I was just like, not into that. Nah, not like I did maybe once or twice, but I put him back pretty quick. Mm-hmm. And then after, that happened a few times, and then I'm like, what is my problem? What's going on here? I was like, okay, there's something else happening. So I remember sitting in the rocking chair in that room, just like, I don't think I moved. I was just like diving into my brain. I'm like, something psychologically is going on with me. Mm-hmm. What is it? And kind of praying about it and trying to think through it. Yeah. That's where I realized, I'm like, I think I'm having resentment for him because he replaced my wife. Yeah. Not that he actually did, but that's what's
right in your
subconsciously going on. Like, he showed up and that means she had to leave, and I didn't want her to leave, so it's his fault. Like, some twisted way. Yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I remember like having that epiphany. I'm like, holy crap. Okay, that's not okay. We got to fix this. So then I went like full 180, and I was like, I got to hold him as much as they will let me until they tell me I can't anymore. And I have to pay attention to him and figure him out and learn him. And so then it's just intentional. Being intentional with him, intentional with my time. When I started to learn him and understand him and kind of start to pick out his personality, even at, 30 weeks, then because I was learning more about him, I felt more connected to him. And then, that kind of fixed those
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
It is that connection. You mentioned in the very, very beginning, you're remarried. Mm-hmm. You got 2 additional children. Kind of give us a little quick summary of how did you go from where you were to now?
A lot of faith. Like, we're not living in Texas anymore. So after my son got discharged from the NICU, was kind of that, now what question, I'm like, I don't know what to do here. Do I stay here? Do I go home? Like, what do I do?
And Utah's home for you?
Yep. I was born and raised in Utah, split between Tooele, Rush Valley, and Saratoga Springs, but all still kind of right in this same area. So I went to the temple and prayed about it. Didn't really get an answer while I was in there, which was weird because I'd usually gotten something while I was in a holier place praying about it and asking God what to do. And I remember sitting in there being like, why are you not talking to me? Like, let's come on. And then I did have a thought hit my mind. It says, why don't you ask your wife? I was like, I could do that? And so then there in the temple, I was like, I don't know how to do that. So I just said kind of out loud, I was like, well, babe, what do I do? And immediately I felt, I cannot describe, felt a difference. Like, I remember her, like what it felt like to be in the same room as her. Suddenly I felt that, and the word stuck in my mind, go home. And I immediately knew what that meant. I was like, all right, I'm packing up and I'm going back to Utah. And I moved back in the same bedroom I was living in when I graduated high school, in my parents' basement. So I became a basement bum at my parents' house.
With a baby?
With a baby. that's basically the only difference is now we have a kid. Right. That was good for me because it gave me a little bit more space to figure myself out a little bit. My parents were there, so they were taking care of watching the kids. So I could take off. I could go for a drive, I could do something. It was one of the hardest things for me to give up as 23-year-old me, was the freedom that I was still getting used to having at 23. Now feeling like I'm almost back to teenage mode, where I have to ask my mom permission if I can leave,
right?
Because somebody has to watch my kid. And I'm like,
Right.
Can somebody watch my kid so I can go to the store?
Right. Yeah.
And so that also mentally was really hard for me at the time. I was angry because of a loss of my freedom. I didn't realize I was angry because of that at the time, but going through some therapy and figuring that out, that was definitely a big one, was a loss of freedom, which is not uncommon to just new parents in general.
Right.
They kind of all of a sudden have this kid they have to take care of, and it like ties them to their house. So you lose friends, you can't go do all these social things anymore. And, so it was like that, but worse, because I'm emotionally feeling alone. I was never actually alone. There were so many people that helped.
But isn't that an interesting thing that we experience?
Yeah.
Where we can be surrounded by people, but yet inside we feel alone.
Mm-hmm. I did. And I even knew it while I was in it. I could see people helping and people asking if they could help. So eventually, to get to, meeting in the widowers circles, we call it your chapter 2. Some people hate that term, but it's called your chapter 2. Yeah. And my wife Kearsley is my chapter 2, and now obviously my biggest chapter. Then I'm living back with my parents, and I felt just something pulling at me. And now when I go speak and I share this story around, if I'm talking to youth or whoever, I say, if you do enough mental and emotional work within yourself, you'll at least get to a point where you feel like there's a trumpet calling to you, way off in the distance somewhere. But it's like where your heart's supposed to go. Like you could call it God's calling. That's what I think it is, or you know, whatever you want to believe that is. But if you do enough work in yourself, you will at least take the earplugs out and you can kind of hear it. And that's what it was like for me. And it was like, I need to do whatever work in myself I need to do so that I'm open to another relationship, should one be provided to me, or if God puts that in my path. And so that's why I was like, I'm going to start doing some therapy, because I really didn't want to do that. I was kind of stigma about it at the time. Obviously completely changed my opinion on that. And then going through that, I kind of felt the pull. I was like, okay, not only do I need to be willing and doing the work, I actually need to put myself in a position where it can happen, because I'm just being a hermit right now, and it's not going to work like that. So I remember downloading a dating app and feeling absolutely sick to my stomach that I was even doing that, because imagining myself with anybody else other than my first wife was a disgusting thought to me at the time. So I downloaded a dating app and I put pictures of both me and my son, at the hospital, and everything was on there. And as much as the room that I had, I put as much as I could in the story, and where we were at. I was like, hey, either if somebody swipes on this, they're either going to be absolutely nuts, or they're going to be some really emotionally intelligent people. I don't think it's going to be. It at least weeds out the tire kickers,
right? For sure.
But I was like, I also don't know where I'm at mentally if I can tell the difference. That was kind of faith on my part and praying about it. And I remember going through the dating app and swiping. I said no to every single lady that was in the entire region. I just said no. And I got to the end, it's like, there's no more options. I'm like, well, great, this isn't working.
Like I tried.
Yep, I was like, well, that was that. And, I had the thought come up as like, well, you only said no because they're not who you're looking for. I'm like, all right, that's fair. So I got looking into it, and there's a premium version that you could pay for. So you wouldn't have to swipe. It would just tell you if somebody swiped on you. So then you only had to go through the ones that had already swiped on you. And I was like, take my money, and I don't ever want to look at this. Right. So I paid for that, and I turned the notifications off, disabled them completely so I wouldn't be notified, because it was freaking me out that it might notify me. A few days later, at some point, I'm up at 2:00 in the morning feeding Vance, and finally get him back down to sleep. And I remember sitting on my bed, kind of like, I don't feel like I can sleep right now, but I don't know what to do. And then my phone was suddenly like magnet. I was like, I need to check that. I was like, no, I don't want to do that. But I finally gave in and checked it. And there was like 4 or 5 that had swiped. And so I'm like, all right, now I guess starts the, are you crazy or not kind of thing. So just started having conversations, and from what I could tell, all of them were awesome. And my wife Kirsty is the first one that I went on a date with.
Really?
So
Oh, I love it.
we went on our first date, and I remember I was still very angry at God. I was still not happy about everything. I remember somebody telling me that somebody at some point in my life said, even if you're angry at God, at least tell him, don't stop talking to him.
Yes.
So that's all I could do for a while. And I remember saying a prayer before we went on our first date, and it was kind of a frustrated prayer again. And I was like, whatever you think is more important to have Lauren on the other side for, I'm calling in some PTO and she's coming with me. Because I don't trust myself to judge this woman. I need her to tell me if this is okay. I left it at that and went on the date, and we had a great time, great conversation. So I was feeling pretty good about it by the end. And then I remember as Kirsty was driving away from where we ended our date at, kind of said out loud, kind of similarly as I did in the temple that one time, I was like, well, babe, what do you think? And as soon as I said that, I got this roof like across my whole body. I was like, whoa. And the feeling, it kind of actually made me teary-eyed a little bit. I'm like, why was that so powerful? I didn't have words saying like, you need to marry her. That's not what the message was. It was more like a feel okay going down this path with her.
Okay, this was good. Yeah.
Like I'm not one to subscribe to the idea that God tells you like, you have to marry this person. No. That's not my personal belief, because I think that's a two-way decision. Right. But I was at least given the green light to continue with that. So set up another date and went on another date, and it was equally as awesome. We had a great time and decided like, yeah, we're gonna do this thing. We got married a few months later. Yeah,
it's amazing. Now 2 little kids.
Yeah, we got
in that there's 3 total, and so fun. So earlier you mentioned speaking.
Yeah.
Right. I know it's a passion of yours. Tell us a little bit about that. Tell us why. Right? Why speaking, and why the passion around your topic or your theme?
The theme I focus on the most is transforming fear. Transforming fear into whatever the theme might be. But usually, if I get to pick it, I call it transforming fear into magnetic momentum, which is a unique twist on it. The reason why is because that's what I feel like I was able to do with the help of everybody that held me and the help of God, and taking everything that was so scary at the time and turning it into excitement instead for the future and possibility, and actually making things happen. And one of my taglines is force success the way you want it to look. And even though there's a little bit of a caveat to that, sometimes the way that you want it to look isn't quite right. You might have to shift that.
Right. Yes.
But eventually once you do get your heart and your mind aligned, and you're emotionally aligned and you're spiritually aligned, then you have a much better picture on what you actually want. And then once you're aligned that way, then it becomes a lot more simple to make it happen. You can trust that even if it's a time kind of like I'm in right now, I'm in the infancy stages of the speaking thing, and it's a grind, but I know it's coming. Like, I have no doubt that who I need to speak to and the opportunities, the events that they come, and they do. Like this weekend at the time of recording, I'm flying to Texas this weekend to do a widows and widowers conference, so things come up. That's the theme, and my ideal audience that I like to help the most is young adults, particularly young adult men, but both young adult men and young adult women that are in that process of like, what do I do now that I've graduated high school? What do I do now that I'm graduating college? Like those, I call them your cliff jump moments, You know what
I love about life is that it tends to teach us something most of the time in a way we don't really want, but life teaches us something that then we have an opportunity to turn around and help other people.
Oh yeah. That's what I felt like when I talked about the trumpet calling to you, it was never something like, hey, I'm going to eventually do this kind of a thing. That I wouldn't say came out of left field, but suddenly realizing that that's what the pull was kind of a left field moment. But I had been feeling the pull for about a year before I decided to start doing it. I just felt like there was something more that I was supposed to be doing, either for my family or in my personal development, or there's something more that I was supposed to be doing, and I could not figure out what it was for life. It was driving me absolutely nuts. I'd pray about it, I'd ponder about it, I'd talk to my wife about it, and just every once in a while I'd be sitting here on the couch, I'm like pulling my hair. I'm like, why am I feeling this way? Finally, eventually, my mother actually recommended a series of books to me, some things that changed her life. And those books were by Leslie Householder. The first one's called The Jackrabbit Factor, and I think the series she just calls the Jackrabbit Factor series. So I had already resonated with those. And then while I'm sitting, a couple years down the road, I'm like, just in this kind of mindset, I was like, I'm just going to read those other 2 books. And I read the other 2 books. And as I was reading those, I finally felt for the first time I was actually making progress towards whatever was pulling me. I still had no idea what it was, but you can feel satiated a little bit. You know, I'm like, okay, there's actually some progress here. And finished those books immediately. Like the next day after I finished the last book, I was finishing a job. It was my day job, and I was just getting on my way home. And as I sat back in it, all of a sudden this weight hit me. It was like, you need to go see your mom. And I was like, oh crap, is she okay? Like, I'm like, oh no, and now what's going on? So I booked it up to my mom's house, and she's fine. She's just doing her workout in her house. So then for the next hour, we just small talked. I'm like, why am I here? And then she shared an experience that she had that was kind of this mantle sit thing where she's like, I need to do a lot more for women and girls and self-esteem, like all these kinds of things. Cause she had just a few days previous viewed virtually live streamed the funeral services for a young woman in their neighborhood who had taken her own life. And so she was sharing this with me. And as she was getting through the end of that, and I was kind of talking to her, giving her my thoughts, all of a sudden it hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm like, oh crap. I gotta like actually get out there and speak and share the story. So I'm like, oh no, that was so much anxiety. The only person that I knew that I had ever heard of that did anything like that was Chad. Who we both know.
I think sometimes, you know, God just gives us the first next step, and he's waiting for us to just go into the unknown. He gives us just a little, but I think sometimes we have to demonstrate that we're willing to do that even when we have no idea where it's going to lead us. Yeah. Right?
And sometimes I also believe that he might not have a very specific mission for us. Oftentimes he does. Yeah. But sometimes there just might be something that would fulfill you more if you were doing something in this realm, you know? And I think oftentimes the miracles that we need in order to accomplish those things, he leaves up to us.
100%. There are 1,000 different ways to get to where we want to go, right? Like, I don't think that there's one right path. And I think sometimes me personally I can get obsessive about like, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the thing I'm supposed to be doing?
We don't want to do anything until we feel like he's told us what to do.
Right.
You know?
And he's like, goodness gracious, just
pick something.
Just go, right?
Like, whose idea was it for Peter to walk on water?
Right.
You know, whose idea was it for the woman with the issue of blood to be healed by touching his garment? Like, he didn't tell them to do that. It was their idea. And he said, that sounds good to me. Fine. Let's do it.
We'll make that work.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
No, I love it. Well, one last question for you. What advice would you give to our audience, those that are just in the middle of their heart? May look like yours, may be completely different, but we all have middles, right? What would you tell them?
I'm going to look into the camera for this one.
Yes, do it.
The clarity that you're looking for comes through committed movement. If you're waiting, like what we just said, if you're waiting for the clarity before you move, you will wait the rest of your life. As long as you have a general idea of maybe where you should go, you're still getting closer to whatever it actually is. Just jump, launch, and then aim and make corrections along the way. And as long as you're making progress, then the clarity shows up.
Oh my heck, I love it. Thank you so much for your wisdom, your spirit, everything about you. It's been phenomenal. Well, my friends, you've heard it from Weston. It's take that commitment. What did you call it?
Clarity comes through committed movement.
Clarity comes through committed movement. I love it. Is that another one of your taglines?
If I had to take the book that I wrote, which I didn't even mention that, the book's called The Overhaul, Fixing Your Mindset and Driving Success. If I had to take the whole book down to one sentence, that's what it would be.
That's what it is?
Yep.
Go get his book, everyone.
There's one other thing that they might like. We didn't talk a whole lot about it, but we'd mentioned like the miracles thing, Peter and them. I wrote an ebook called God's Laws of Success. That's free. So if you go to my website, westonbrandon.com, it should pop up right there. You can download it. And it's just a little bit more of my perspective on how I think we ought to go about how we pray and how we make things happen in our life the way that we want them to. And actually, how do we do the committed movement? What does that look like?
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story, your wisdom, the things that you've learned. It's been amazing.
Yeah, thanks. I'd love it.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me on Waking the Why. If today's story moved you, share it with someone who needs it. And don't forget, your why is worth waking up for.